amazing to see this audience. It's a great honor for us. Looking at last year, no doubt 2012 was the year of activism. There's a big shift of what we see today in the threat landscape, and it's a quite fascinating thing. So usually, how do we know that things happen? We usually know them by basically the press, right? So I collected a significant amount of attack and different logos. There's much more than that. And it's there on the press. We see them on a regular basis. But cyber criminal and cyber war is a hidden one. There's much more of that. And the question usually is what happened on all those organizations that are out there and we don't know? Actually, the question is even much more interesting. The question is, what happened for you, for your specific organization? Do you know if you've been hacked? Do you know if something going on? I mean, this is cyber war, right? You can be breached, information can be taken out, it can be jeopardized, and you don't know. For years, not for days, for years. This is a totally different war. You're not familiar, it's not the regular vocabulary that we're familiar with. Boundaries are different, visibility is different, so it's a much more interesting story. So once you know, or you don't know if you've been breached, the second question usually will be, how can I protect against it? What should I do? From a very high level, looking at the architecture and the things that you'd like to do in order to protect your environment. So that's the essence of the reports that you got, the Checkpoint 2013 security reports, and I'm going to talk about a lot of findings from this specific report, and I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. All the stories that you're going to hear today are real stories. So how do we collect the data? It's quite unique. What we did, we went over, we are taking our product, we put it in a tap mode, listening mode, and we're looking for everything that flows in this segment of the network. We ran 2,000 of those tests in organization. Last year we took about 1,000 of them, we put them into a database and we scramble and see what it is. It's containing about 120,000 hours of listening to different networks, looking for intrusions that happen, looking for bots, looking for people going to malicious website, data leak from the organization. So all the information that I'm going to show you today is real information. It's not a speculation, it's not waving hands, it's based on real companies with real names out there. So that was one major source for things that I'm going to show you. The second source is our threat clouds. So we have significant amount of sensors around the world that contain data and send it us back. We can analyze it. So we took all of it together. As you see, it's from all over the world, 62 countries, so it's not one specific place. I'm going to talk about boundaries, but boundaries here has totally changed. Different verticals, it could be government, it could be industrial, it could be financials. It's really all over the place. And we compile this specific information into what I'm going to show you today and what you got, and I'll be happy if you can read during your flight back. So, as I told you before, this presentation is real. It's not a fiction, it's not a science. I'm going to show a couple of things that happen, all of them with names, so you know it's based on real information. The first story I want to tell you is about bots, and specifically about botnets, and how can it harm your network. It actually started in this city. You're familiar with this city? It's not far away from here. It's in New York, actually in the New York Times. It happens in September 12, 2012, just recently, right? Half a year ago. What happened was an email. Specific email was sent to the New York Times. Surprisingly or not, 3 people decide to click on a link inside this email. When they were clicking in this link, a bot and a malware download to their computers. This malware actually, what happened was that it started communicating. It actually communicated to 1 or 2 specific universities in the US. By the way, those universities were actually participating in a couple of other attacks that happening, but actually not the university attack. What happened is what we call drop zone. This is a place where a hacker take control, and from there he operates places. You know, hackers and people who want to attack prefer not to be seen, and they don't want to pay for infrastructure. So they take control of somebody else's infrastructure, and from there moving on. If you know, for example, Germany is a great place to do drop zones because they have a very good infrastructure. So just to let you know. And it's a very reliable environment. So Does University actually was just one hop in the way, and as much as we understand, it actually continued back to China. We don't know for sure if it's China. Why? Because in the cyberspace, there's no boundaries. We don't know, there's no passport. People don't pass from one place to another. So it can be everywhere. There's a good reason why it's in China and why we believe it's in China, because actually, just prior to this attack, there was an article published by the New York Times about the wealth, a couple of billions of dollars that were gained by the relatives of the Chinese Prime Minister. And there was a big article about it, and as much as the New York Times claimed, basically they want to take control of the resource for these specific articles. By the way, if you think about it in a much global view, you can understand how cyber can affect our lives, right? Because if people would be afraid to go to journalists and tell them what they think, it really can unbalance democracy. So it's even much stronger than just a very basic thing that happened. Let's go back for our attack. So 2 weeks has passes, 42 computers being affected. It just continued to spread around the network of the New York Times, and it get to the domain controllers. When it get to the domain controllers, it's basically control the network of the New York Times around the world. It has username and password for everything, and they succeed to break into the mail server. And indeed, what happened, 2 specific individual mailboxes been broken, and information was taken out of them. Actually, one of them is the reporter. There's the names of it. One of them is the reporter of this specific attack, and the second one is the editor. So usually, when you hear this story, which is quite an interesting story, no doubt, you basically ask yourself, why is it relevant for me, right? I'm not a journalist, and I'm not that sexy that people will come to me, so I'm just doing my business, so people will not go for me, so that's probably okay. And surprisingly or not, 63% of organizations that we check their networks, some of them are customers, some of them not our customers, we found bots in the network, 63%. So you can look at it, right? So either it's you or somebody who sits next to you. Roughly, that's what it is. It's based on real data, and that's what's happening today. You don't know about it, right? You don't know that 80% of the spam in the world has been sent by bots. So it might be that your organization is actually sending spam and you don't know. Most of the distributed denial of services attack in the world are generated by bots. So it might be that your organization is actually attacking other organizations without you meant that it will happen. So things like that happen. They communicate all the time back to somebody who operates them. I think that's the unique of what Checkpoint is doing. We looked at the traffic because we are a gateway. We can stand out and see the traffic. And one, we understand that there is a command and controls going on. We can basically quarantine the specific bots and not allow it to continue back, and then it's basically useless. Let's talk a bit more about bots and bot activity. I want to give you 2 examples of botnets. Network of bots. Usually they contain millions of bots. 2 of them, one is very familiar, Zeus. It's a network that used to steal credentials. Take from your computer the financial credential and allow you to steal significant amount of millions of dollars. In this case, it's about $47 million that have been stolen. So that's like one case. The second one, it's actually a much more robust botnet and much more aggressive, because it can search your computer, it can delete file, it can take data from your organization. It's a shell. It's allowed the operator of the bot to actually configure what he wants to do. Now, one thing to say about bot and botnet, which is very important. If you want to hack somebody's network, you don't need to own a botnet. There's people who own it for you. You actually rent them. And I can tell you that prices for botnet has dropped dramatically. It used to be about $300 per day, and it's now about $120. It's all in the internet. So what you need to do is to go out there for somebody who operates a botnet. You can see through a web interfaces, where are the bots, which country. You can pay money, and you can tell them, I want you to attack these specific IP addresses. And this hacking industry has become mature, because now you don't need to build a weapon in order to fight. Somebody else build it for you. So it's much more available, and that's one of the reasons what we see so many activities going on in the cyber, much more than what we saw before. How do we protect against bot? There's two major principles I want you to remember. One, prevention. Many organizations doing a lot of detection. Detection is nice. It generates a lot of information. We usually can't keep up with this information, and we cannot understand really the information, and it really doesn't protect you. Right? It's there, you get a big database, a big log, but things continue to happen. So the first and the most important things, when you implement the security solution, put it in prevention. The second thing is multiple layer of protection. Think about the hotel. You're going inside the hotel, there's a concierge at the beginning, you get to register, you go to the room, there's a key. Inside the room there is a safe, there could be bars in the windows. So you don't have one single thing to protect things. Don't think that there is a silver bullet. You need to do many things. So prevention and multi-layer of protection, that's probably the most important principle to protect a network. So a couple of things that we're doing, for example, for bot and overall on malware. One is anti-bot. As I mentioned before, scan for the traffic going from your organization, identified command and control. That's when you've already been affected, and prevent it from happening. The second layer is antivirus, and more than that, something that can be updated on a regular basis that prevent bots from coming inside the organization. This is for known bots. This is for known things that you already know about. And the last thing is, as Gil mentioned before, threat emulation. The ability to emulate things that go into your network and check that they are not containing any malicious code that will go inside to your computer. If you do those multiple layer, the chances that you will be affected will be much lower. So you protect against bots that are existing in your network and bots that want to get inside your network. How do you get infected by bot? I mentioned a couple of things, just to save it for the next one. One is emails with links in the web, and it's important. I'm going to talk more about secure web gateway and how you need to make sure that it's a secure web gateway, not just web gateway. The second thing is by attachment, and we mentioned emulation. And the last thing is people that are using application. We're all using application, and that's changed the game. Why has it changed the game? Because web application is something new. Think about many years ago, what you used to do in the internet was to write URL, right? Today, look at your smartphone. It's all application. You don't write a URL mostly. A significant amount of the traffic in the world today is done by applications, and people run different applications in the network. In the security space, most of the people were examining ports and IP addresses, and you don't know exactly which application are you running, and that's became so crucial for us today. So people are running some malicious application, and I'm going to give you a couple of them. People run anonymizers. They actually bypass firewall policy to go outside deliberately inside your organization. People running remote admin tools. Some of them it's okay. The help desk want to have remotely access to your network, but some of it is purely by taking controls of other people's computer. People do a lot of file sharing. About 75% of organizations are using Dropbox, and people are using peer-to-peer applications. That's quite a lot. People really enjoy to save some money on intellectual property, and they prefer to get movies and songs and so forth, and they use peer-to-peer application. If you look at peer-to-peer application, that's a peer-to-peer application. So you go out there and say, I'm going to install it in my computers. What happened then? You basically open a backdoor for all your organization, because your PC or laptop is connected to the network for one side. From the other side, you decide that you want to share it with big audience of people that you don't know, you don't trust, but they can give you something. And you give them part of your machine that's connected to the network. And actually two things can happen. One, information can be stored in your computer, which is a malicious one. It can go inside the network and do big damages. And from the other side, sensitive data from your computers can go out there. surprisingly or not, 61% of the organization that we checked, we found out that there is peer-to-peer application running in the network. Again, we can run those tests for each one of you. We do it for free. It's called 3D security reports. We'll be happy to run it for each one of you, and you might see things that are happening in your specific environment. How do you protect against it? So, as I mentioned before, because internet has changed, it's important to control where you're going, where you want to go to not to be affected. And there's two major layers. One is the regular URL filtering you're familiar with, but here the purpose, and if you look at Secure Web Gateway, the major focus of Secure Web Gateway for many years was don't go to gambling site, don't go to porn site. It mostly was HR things to make sure that it's happening correctly. But now the most important thing is that you shouldn't go to a malicious website that just by clicking a link you'll be affected. So security on Secure Web Gateway is much more important, and this commodity has changed now to be so important that when you're building a Secure Web Gateway, you need to make sure it's really, really secure. The second thing that of course you have to run is application, and you need to have this ability to control from the same place both applications. So if you want to block gaming, I want to block gaming, it's a website of gaming, but I also want to block gaming inside Facebook. And I need somehow to correlate both of them together. And that's quite unique to check when we have the largest amount of coverage of applications in the world. And we have this combination of URL filtering and application control as one, not to mention that all of the data get feeds on a regular basis from the threat clouds that allow us all the time to check if something going on. If we found in one place a malicious website, we automatically update all the rest of our gateways in the world. Don't go there without even need to check it again. Again, here we protect against things that we might go to the wrong places. Let's talk about attacks that are happening all the time, external attacks. So this is quite an interesting story. This is happening in Italy. It's a combination of SQL injection and a distributed denial of service attack. Actually happened in Italy, again last year from July to October, specifically in an education institute. Education institutes usually are much more vulnerable because they allow people to do many stuff in their environment. We saw there about 6,000 attempts with SQL injection to go into the network. What was much more interesting that basically in 2 days there were 4,000 attacks like that. They generate by many sessions that try to get to the same place. Basically run this specific code, is the real code into that, and the idea behind it is very simple. You're going to a specific place for a specific form inside an application and try to find values out there that will drop the front office and allow you to get to the back office, to the database, and get everything you want to get out of it. In many cases, the ability to do so related to two things. One is DDoS, and I'm going to talk afterwards a bit more about the DDoS. And the second thing is how good you patch your systems, how much you prevent it from known vulnerabilities. So, again, is it relevant for you? And the answer for sure is yes. Most of the organization, in order to protect things from happening, need to patch the systems. As you know, the different vendors, Adobe, Microsoft, and so forth, that provide on a regular basis, for example, Microsoft, called Patch Tuesday. Every last Tuesday of the month, they will come up with all the list of vulnerabilities that they found out and the patches, right? And then you get the screen, hey, restart your computer, because you need to restart it for updates from those specific patches. If we don't patch the systems, basically what will happen is that we are exposed to a known, well-documented vulnerabilities. In many cases come up with the exploit, so it's quite easy for a hacker to get inside your network. So you need to patch the systems. Many of us, it takes quite a long time to patch a system. It's an ongoing, troublesome situation, and there's a way to help you in this one. The second thing that happened is the amount of variation of different malware that happen is quite big. In this case, we're talking about 5,000 of them every year, so it's a massive things that you need to take control of on a regular basis. So how do you protect against it? Of course, you put a firewall. That's the basic thing. But then you took an IPS, and it's very important that you have an updated IPS, again, not an IDS, but an IPS in the network that have the largest coverage against those vulnerabilities. So at least if you take this IPS and make sure it's updated and protected, those known vulnerabilities that are part of this patch will be stopped at the gateway, allow everything behind the gateway to continue and be secure until you patch them, and I really encourage you to patch them. If you want to have the largest coverage for those vulnerabilities, again, Gil mentioned NSS and other reports, we can give you this information about how do we make sure that we have the largest catch rate and the largest coverage for all known vulnerabilities exist today. And the last thing is talk about a bit, it's about distributed denial of service and our product called DDoS Protector. One thing has dramatically changed in this distributed denial of service. It used to be that I have a line to the internet, like 10 years ago, and all what people try to do is put the line down. So they will produce massive traffic until the line was shutting down, and they were successful. What the organization did for that, you can't protect it on your own gateway because it's too late, it's too close to you. So they would go back to the service providers and say, please scrub my traffic and see what you can do in order to help me. So that was good in a time. It takes some time until the traffic will scrub up and then it's clean up and then you can do something about it. Today, actually the line to the internet became much bigger and it's much more difficult to block them. And what we clearly see is attack called low and slow. So people that try to hack, as I show you in this incident in Italy, to go to specific application and just try to have many queries to this application until the application is falling down. And for that, the solution is to look specifically on your traffic. And if this specific traffic that you have to this specific site has changed, and you can set the rate for that, we'll block it automatically for you. And that's roughly the principle of how to protect, again, distributed denial of services today. The last thing I want to talk about is data loss. And how does it happen? Most of the data loss that we see in organizations are happening by employees, usually by accident, but it's happening all the time, many times. This case happening in the UK. It's a city council called Trent. I checked when I was in the UK. Nobody knows where it is. It's somewhere in the middle of nowhere. So, it's funny, I'm talking from a very small Middle East country. So there was a lawyer there, and he got a new laptop, and he planned to send sensitive information out there, so he has to rewrite the stuff that he meant to read. He did typos on the email. Can happen, but those typos led him to send emails with really sensitive and confidential information outside. The email went outside, and the result was 11 emails like that. In the UK, there's a clear rule and clear law, and basically they were fined, as you can see, about $200,000 fine just for this specific incident. Now, can it happen to you? I want to give a couple of other examples. This one happened in Canada. I believe there are some people here in Canada. So there was 2 USB devices that were stolen or lost. And they contain 2.4 million records. 2.4 million records of voters. So that's quite a massive one. Another example is happening here in the US. People basically upload significant amount of data about text and text reports and so forth just out there. In Australia, somebody sent an email, veteran from the army, again with a lot of records about those individuals. And the last thing was a garage sale happening in the UK. I thought it's only in the US, but surprisingly it's done also in the UK. And somebody just sold a hard drive. And the hard drive, again, contains significant amount of data. So you can see the data can be lost by various ways. It's not necessarily just by emails that somebody sends, right? In this case, there's a USB, somebody upload a file, an email, a hard drive that's been sold or stolen or whatever. So many places where information stays. And again, in our survey, 54% of organization, again, for the time that we looked, from a policy that's outside of the box, 54% of organization lost sensitive data. And if I go down, this is the data that we've seen out there. Financial data, source code for high-tech companies, it's a very big issue. Salaries and compensations, bank account and business data records, all of it, things that we've seen out there. So how do you protect here? Again, this is a multi-layer of protection, and Gil mentioned before data protection. It's a bit orthogonal to the network, but it's so important to protect the access with the network and to protect the data itself. If you have both of them, you'll probably be much more secure. So, data leak prevention, something that you need to implement on the gateway usually. It's the easiest place to implement. If you're looking at data leak prevention, I will highly recommend not to start with the endpoint, but start with the gateway. I would suggest you to encrypt both your hard drive and your USB. It's so important. So data at rest, wherever it is, if something happens, it's still secure. And the last thing is document security. Again, remember, when data is encrypted, I don't care where it is, because only the relevant people who get access to this encryption can actually read it. And by that, I can save significant amount of the damage happening by losing data. So, overall, when I'm looking in organization and what happened in this specific report, 3 numbers I'll be happy if you take from there. 63% of organization, we found bots in their network. 61% of them running peer-to-peer application, a dangerous application, and there are more dangerous applications besides this specific one. And significant amount of organization are losing data on a regular basis without them knowing even that. The way to protect it is by building the right infrastructure. It's not one specific product, it's not one specific functionality. The ability to look at the organization and have all those layers that I mentioned before happening to them, it's probably the right way. And the way we build our solutions, it's not a product, it's an infrastructure. Once you have enforcement points spread around your network or on your endpoint, ability to start and activating more and more software blades on them allow you to get multiple layers of protection on the same infrastructure. You can manage it together, which is such a robust thing. You have one single log, one single policy, one single administrator that can manage those multiple layers of protection. And you have the ability to cope with the complexity of these solutions from single place. So that's a very robust one. So what Checkpoint really wants to offer for you is not one specific product and one specific function. It's a full infrastructure. So thank you for listening to my presentation. And again, everyone here who wants us to run this security check for him will be happy to run it. And the last thing, I want to thank everybody for being a customer of Checkpoint. Thank you very much.
In 2012, Cyber